You can be great at prompting. You can even be using the best models and doing literally everything right. And AI will still quietly drop what you asked for. Not edge cases, not polish, core requirements. That's the part nobody warns you about. The failure mode is silent. After thousands of hours building with AI, coding, writing, planning, 6 practices have survived. Here's the first one, and it's the one I would try first. Most people, of course, type their prompts. But when you type, you edit as you go, right? You strip out the tangents, the unnecessaries, the uncertainties, the things you're not really sure of. You want to feel intelligent when you're typing this out, and you really don't want to type too much. But that messiness is exactly where the intent lives. So I stopped typing. I talk. I really want to be able to do a quick lookup for words. I want to be able to search, look up words, find the etymology for them. I also need to be able to look up slang very quickly, be able to tell what era that slang was from. That should be denoted quite clearly, kind of meme generated ideas. I really like seeing first usage and derivations and also kind of how it's changed over time. So I think that's kind of also an extra important. And I want to be able to do phrases. I want to be able to do idioms, things like that. All of this should kind of fit together in a puzzle. It should look something like Spotlight. I should be able to bring it forward very easily, very, very quickly. So now I have thousands of words of kind of raw thinking. If I just throw that at AI and say, build this, I get something kind of shallow. The real unlock is what happens next. You give this thinking piece a place to live. Okay, if you do all your thinking in chat, you end up with kind of vibes, a big long thread, kind of half decisions, no real artifacts that are easy to get out, nothing that you can really easily reuse, except for that chat, of course. And chat is ephemeral. Files are durable. So I stopped treating the conversation as the work. I treat the folder now as the work. Here's the practice. You open a project folder, start creating context right there. This makes your work reusable. You can come back next week. You can hand it to a different context. You can hand it to a future you. And this is not dev specific. This is how I do everything with AI now, including this video. Okay, what you're about to see is the exact workflow that I use to get started with all of my videos and pretty much all of my other work, which is pretty highly various, and I'm sure it is for you as well. Basically, we've started in a new folder. I've just created a brand new folder, then created 4 subfolders. They don't have anything in them. I currently have dropped something in. We'll look at that in a second, but I do create a Claude MD file. This Claude MD file is a simple guidance file that says the content in is where I put stuff. This is where the user comes in and puts content into the system, and the content out is where the agent writes stuff. So as we're writing new artifacts, what I don't want is I don't want another agent in the future to pick up artifacts from the output file and be polluted. If I'm trying to say, take a look at all the stuff I've shared with you, let's keep working on that, it may read on its own stuff. So if it reads from content out, I want to do that very explicitly. I want to say, go read this file that's in content out. So it'll just say, this is a place that agents should only write here and should read from content in. That's pretty much it. All right, so let's move into the rest. So as you just saw, I record what I call walks. This is me clearly walking around, just talking out loud and recording it all, and then I transcribe it. So you can even see, this is literally how I started this video. This was the walk file that began this whole video. And you can see how partial it is and how many stammers I'm doing and stopping and going back and forth. So that's for real. That's something I really do. And as you can see, it's a very long transcript of a big walk that I did, just talking through everything that I might want to start covering. I really need to dump as much as I can because what I've got, that's the treasure. And then from here, we're carving it down. So this is the raw marble that we've created. And from here, I put this back into Claude and said, hey, just take a look at this file and tell me where you think we are. All right, it comes back and says, okay, this was pretty solid. You've got a whole bunch of this information in here, some of the things that we kind of need to push forward on. And that's where it asked me questions the first time around. Let me show you those real quick. So I'm sharing the Walko1 questions file with you. And this is just what it came back with in chat the first time around. And it said, oh, well, there's some things that I think that we really need to kind of follow up on and get more understanding about. So let me ask you some questions. And I said, hold up, stop there. Remember, the chat is not the thing that we're going for here. So I said, write all your questions to a file and put it in the content call it Walko1 questions, and then I'll answer them. So as you might imagine, I created another file. I simply came up here and said Walko1 answer file, right? So this is the answer file. And as you can see, it's a big transcript, another very large transcript. But what I'm doing here is I'm telling it, okay, I'm recording an addendum to the Walko1 file. I may be reading the questions and answering them at the same time. And the first one is, what does brownfield process look like? And of course, that's what this says. What does the brownfield process actually look like that you work in? So I went and just recorded answers to everything. And then the next time I came back here, I could then say, okay, read through the answers that I have, the questions and the answers that I have. Now you can kind of contextualize, let's move forward from there. So what you're seeing is me use the operating system. What we're doing is holding this folder as really the source of truth. It's our product. So from there, I then say, okay, I need you to create kind of an outline for me, what's important here, what's not important, and really where we started, had you looked at any of this, it is not the video that we ended up with. It was much broader in its original scope. And then working with AI, it started teasing out a few of the very important items that I said, hold up, while you're coming up with those different items, I want you to start writing some files and content out. So every time it comes back with a big list or has thoughts or has concerns, I say, great, write that out as a file, write that out as a file. It sounds a little pedantic at some point, but what happens is I end up with a bunch of files here that I can index back into at any time and say, great, I want to talk a little bit more about these questions you had. Or you brought up a really good angle over here that I kind of want to lean into. Can you go read more about what your thoughts were? Instead of making the conversation that I have going be the only direction that we can take, I'm kind of creating a graph by using these files at all times. And that brings us about to this phase where we have multiple scripts that have been written. I have a full inventory of all the topics that it could read out of my original file and the things that I thought I might want to share. And it's really all my content, all my intent that I put in the beginning that we're driving from and kind of editing down. I'm now working with an editor. It's also really worth saying I have a set of skills here called vid skills. And inside of these skills, I have a whole bunch of different actions that I can take. And those are very common actions on working with scripting and brainstorming and researching and a bunch of other things that I've written as a skill set. That's for a later date, but I do use that, and that's how I end up with these different scripts and how the scripts all end up with a format that I'm used to and that I'm comfortable with and I can make quick sense of. So that's the whole process of how I work in this kind of bare document or this bare folder that we started with and just talk into it, save it as a file, tell AI, read it. What do you think? What else do we need? This is the direction I think I'm going. It asks questions, I answer questions, I give it more context. When I come up with more ideas, I'll create more walk files, as you might imagine. So it just keeps going and going. And many times I end up with 4 or 5 different script variants. And I kind of have to pick which direction I'm going to go with any given video content. And that really is the one that I end up shooting. Really, in the end, if you take anything away from this one little tip here, like, I can't say how important this one is. This one's number 2 behind talk instead of type. This one's critically important. The folder is the workspace. Quit letting your chat experience be the workspace. And if you need to carry something forward, get it written down, create an artifact out of it. Those two are critical. Create a folder and just have a conversation there and keep writing artifacts. So I use this same basic process when I'm designing an application and thinking about it and considering it before I get into building it. But once you have a folder full of these kind of real artifacts and PRDs or whatever else you might have, the next step is kind of obvious. It's something we've talked about many times. You plan. And really, frankly, planning is where AI quietly betrays you unless you force it to prove the plan. Okay, so here's the problem. AI planning is confident, and it also is always willing to silently drop your requirements. You might not know this, but I've shown this in a previous video where I did a lot of experimentation. I've run these controlled experiments, the same prompt, the same scope, different runs, and I kept seeing the same thing. Around 40% of what I asked for was just gone. Now, these aren't weird edge cases. These were actually core features that were missing, like the big fundamental features. So now I do one thing almost every single time that I plan. After the plan is generated, I ask for it to verify itself. And I know this feels redundant. You're probably saying, you just did the plan. Why are you going to grade yourself on your own plan? How could that be any different than the plan you just gave me? But it works because it forces a second pass with a different posture, coverage, not creativity. Okay, here we are in a new project. I have an initial PRD. It's a very big PRD, 300, 400 lines of pretty complex requirements. And so what I'm going to do is drop into planning mode and say, plan with initial PRD. Okay, and so here we get with the plan as it finishes, but if I scroll up, you can see this is a really complete plan. This is a very large plan for a very large PRD. So it looks pretty good, but my gosh, it's impossible for me to tell, no matter how diligent I am, it's impossible for me to come through and make sure that literally everything that I asked for is in here. So here's what I do. Down at the bottom in Claude Code, at least, I can come down here and type something new in. And this is a little trick. You can do this any way you like. You can just ask for this very, very simply, but I have a prompt that I like. So if I use my prompt library, then I can bring this up and I have a prompt here that basically says, I want you to evaluate the plan. So it's saying, use the original request PRD already in this conversation as the source. For each major requirement, you can infer, mark covered, partial, missing, that kind of thing. So basically what it's doing is it's saying, look, go look at what I asked for, go look at what you planned, figure out what you missed and score it, and then tell me that, give me a report, and then use that report and replan. I know it sounds obtuse, but watch what this does. Okay, and so here it is. It blows me away every time. This one actually did much better than generally it does, but you can see it starts going through each one of the different parts. Spotlight, pattern, floating overlay, it was covered. The global hotkey is covered, but then you start noticing click outside to dismiss the panel, that's missing. And then you come down and realize that we have the first result is auto-selected. That's not mentioned in the plan anywhere. Certain things are only partially covered. So it does a great job of going through the whole thing. If we scroll down a little bit, it does create a final coverage score. And like I said, this one does a lot better. So we're at 22% missed, which is still kind of astonishing. And if you look down, it has the top gaps by the impact. Clicking outside to dismiss is the first thing. Core dismissal path explicitly in PRD, missed entirely. Tab key navigation between panels, missed. First results auto-selected on appear, missed. Partial immediate typing feedback, missed. Explorer mode, visual signal, kind of the AI tone, the prompt engineering that I put into it. All of these things, related words, which was a really important feature. PRD explicitly lists it. It's not a feature in the plan. There is a ton of stuff. And what did it do? It went on and wrote another patched plan. And if you're still worried about it, obviously you can just run this again. But every time I've run it again, it gets to a 95 or better score. So it really does quite well at this point. But this one, I can't tell you enough how important it is to validate the plan. And you have an AI right there that loves validating things, so let it do it for you. Okay, so we've solved a little bit about planning, and let me once again reinforce, this is one extra prompt. That's it. It's that simple. So now the plan is solid, but you'll hit a new problem if you stay in one long conversation. Your instructions begin to decay, which leads us to practice 4. This one's really easy. Okay, so this one might feel a little bit counterintuitive to some people because it feels like you might be throwing progress away. But the longer a conversation gets, the weaker your instructions become. So we saw this Claude MD file in one of these. These are like the rules that are preloaded into your context. You're kind of do it this way, your style, your testing expectations, or whatever it might be. Like we said, don't write into this folder, read into this folder, that kind of stuff. All of that is injected at the beginning of a context, so when you start a new chat. But that starts to fade. This is a classic pattern. You start the session like run tests before you tell me you're done, and 2 hours later it confidently is telling you that it's done without running anything. Have you seen that? I know I've seen it again and again. It's not because it's malicious, it's because the context is decaying. So the more that's in there, the farther away, essentially, those initial kind of instructions really are. So I clear the context at feature request level. So a new unit of work gets a fresh context. That's a really important concept. And here's the rule that changed everything for me. If I need something to survive across contexts, I don't hope that the model remembers it. I write a document. You saw me doing this earlier. That's what the folder technique is really doing. It's making memory external, and it keeps the work sharp. And once you're clearing context, verifying plans, and working from artifacts, you're set up for the biggest unlock, walking away. Okay, so most people hit the same ceiling with AI. They become a babysitter. They're not building, they're supervising. And we all know there's going to be some supervision, but sitting there approving things, switching tabs, checking progress, context switching all day long, it's exhausting. So I wanted a different posture. I wanted to hand off work and get it done, and then come back when it was finished. So I built a system called Do Work. The headline isn't autonomous. The headline is it's autonomous and traceable, because autonomy without traceability is really just chaos. If you can't answer what's changed and why did it change and where did it come from, you're going to be scared to let it run. Traceability is what buys you confidence. Confidence is what buys you time. Okay, we're going to be sharing this little application that you've seen me talking about, and you've seen the PRD for and the plan and a bunch of other things. It's an application called WordLight, and it really is a spotlight for words and wonder and that sort of thing. And I'm going to show you the moment that made this click for me. Okay, so when I'm selecting an item, I see that there's etymology, but I'd really like that to be formatted a little bit better. It's starting to look good, but there's just this big run-on of all the information, and it's in italics. And then also, as I click between items, I'll notice that the explore items are not updating relative to my selection. So it kind of feels like if I'm on a slang term or something like that, you might have different explore items. I understand that we have slang multiple times. In fact, I'll even take a screenshot and show you that on the tiles themselves, we have slang twice. So I can show you that I used the slash command, but I can also see that it's a slang definition. So I don't know. I think that we need to improve that in some way. I use a system that I built, a skill called Do Work. Now, Do Work comes up when you type in Do Work, and you'll see that I can either run the Do Work, capture new tasks, verify the information, very much like we just verified our plan, do a cleanup or check for versions to see if there's updates. Okay, so that's kind of the shape of this, but what it can do is kind of amazing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna paste in all of that diatribe that I just dropped in and let it cook on it for a second. All right, it comes back and it tells us that it is request 68 or user request 19. It tells us it's a complex request with a lot of distinct features and things of that nature. Here are the different 5 items that it mentioned up front. And what it's going to start doing is creating user request documents in here that are related to what I asked for. So if we take a look at the input, then you'll see this is what I said. It is saving the full verbatim input information here. It is also kind of simplifying it up here so that it can understand it. But this is all within the project now. So what I asked for is codified somewhere. It starts creating requirements documents here that are all related to this user request. We're on user request 19. If we look at the etymology formatting, you'll notice that it's related to the user request 19. And so what it's starting to do is kind of tie all these moving parts together in a meaningful way. But most important is it's creating independent requests, verifiable requests against what I asked for in the first place. So now we can come down this and say, okay, did we get everything? And in fact, I showed you, you can do, if you really wanted to, do work verify. And what it will do is essentially what we did last time. It's kind of baked in. It'll look at the last user request. It'll evaluate the actual user request because it has it. Remember, it saved it as a file. And then it'll look through all of the independent requests to make sure that they have the right nuance and everything else inside of them. This is everything that I've just showed you in one place happening all at once. I am not saying that this do work thing is the absolute answer in the future. It's got some challenges in the way that you have to use it. It's pretty simple to use, but it really does everything that I'm trying to hand off here. So if I scroll back through that verify, you can even see we got 88% confidence just from this process. And you can see where it started falling over. It gives us some interesting information about what important items and what minor items it missed, what recommendations it has. And all I have to do is say yes, because it's asking me, do you want me to apply these fixes to these rec files? Yes, and move on. Okay, it came back and it says, okay, we've revised our confidence score to 93%, but the remaining gap is the uncaptured screenshot. We can look at the live UI to do that if you like, or I can just paste the screenshot in here. And I can say, would this help? Okay, so that's fantastic. We have all of these items over here that are just sitting there waiting to be worked on. And then the other half of this really takes over when you do work run. What it starts to do is it just simply picks the first item out of this list that hasn't been claimed. It moves it into working. It completes it in its own subcontext. Remember, we want to clear context whenever we start new feature development. This is feature. This is not independent kind of little tasks. This is not the smallest element that each one of these requests are. These are combined kind of features that make sense together. It's going to do that feature all in one context so that that helps and makes sense. And then it's going to throw that away, return back to the main loop in Claude Code. Claude Code will say, okay, are there more? Yes. Let me take that new one, throw it into a brand new context again, and continue working. I've had this working for multiple hours in a row, fully successfully. So this allows me to actually walk away. And that's really the lesson that we're going for here. All right, I've got to share one other thing with you because this actually is a major unlock. This one's specific to this do work process, but I need to share it because if you come up with your own process and want to come up with your own workflow, here is one thing that I would highly advise that you add to it. If we take a look at previous changes, so these are all the commits, after each one of these requests is complete, a commit is created with context around that change so that you can see all of my previous requests. Now, inside of that request is all of the information that was asked for. Also, all of the supporting files, as you noticed before, are all being checked in. So anything can go in and take a look at what the do work request was and when it fell over. Many times I'll get to a place to where something regresses or something wasn't quite done the way that I thought it was initially, and I come back and tell it, I feel like I have a regression or a bug here. I was asking for this a little while ago, and now it's no longer doing it. And what I've seen Claude do is it will crawl through all of this Git history saying, oh, well, let's find out where that was asked for, because you can see these commit statements all have really complete kind of definitions on them. And it finds the right commit and says, oh, this is when it was requested. Let's move forward and see if anything else changed that file. Oh, it was regressed at this point. We need to put a test in for it. It is really self-solving in a lot of ways. And why? It's because it has enough information to be able to trace all of this. Remember traceability we were talking about? If it can't tell when it was asked for, when it was changed, it can't tell what's going wrong and why it keeps changing. You give it that much information, it can keep track of things for you. Okay, and here's the part about that surprises me. Once you have autonomy, you start noticing all the little frictions that you've been tolerating. And then you realize something. With AI, the bar for building your own tools is nearly on the floor. That's the last practice. Okay, so off-the-shelf tools are generic. They're built for everyone, which means they're built perfectly, basically, for none of us, right? So if something in your workflow is irritating you, build the fix. A slash command, a tiny script, a skill, a hook. Maybe you've heard it as we've been building, that completion sound that I have, that when the builder finishes doing something, it comes back and tells me. That was a tiny tool that I built. It's not impressive software. It's just a missing ergonomic that I wanted, so I built it. And once you start doing this, it compounds. Every little friction becomes an opportunity to smooth the system. This is the meta point of the whole video. Every practice you just saw, the walks, the folder, the verification prompt, the autonomous loop, these are not tips. They're things I built, tested, and threw away, and then rebuilt until they survived. The workflow is a product, and it gets better the same way your products get better. You iterate. Okay, I'm not saying this is the one true way to work with AI. I don't believe that at all. Different people have very different constraints, different roles, different tolerances. What I am saying is after a lot of experimentation, these are the practices that have stayed for me. So if you haven't tried them, try one. Don't adopt all 6 of them, just pick one lever and pull. 6 practices. Talk first, give AI a place to think with you, verify the plan, clear context constantly, automate and walk away, and build your own tools. That, for me, is what survived. If you want the voice-to-text deep dive, subscribe. That's maybe the next one or very soon. And if this helped, I'd love to know which practice you're going to try out first, or really tell me some of your practices. All right. Really, I appreciate you being here. Thanks for coming along for the ride, and I'll see you in the next one.